Hey, what's up? Lightboltjoe here. Today we are going to discuss the 2012 book, The Kane Chronicles, The Serpent Shadow. This is by Rick Riordan. This is the third and final book in the Kane Chronicles trilogy series about Egyptian mythology. This takes place during the Percy Jackson and the universe and the Olympians / Heroes of Olympus universe. It's all part of the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles, if you will. So there are other stories that Sadie and Carter Kane are a part of. Like there is a crossover book of 3 separate stories of Percy and Carter, Sadie and Annabeth, and then all 4 of them together. So we are going to read that book and talk about that after this. So what happens in this book? Where's this obelisk? What's up with this serpent shadow? And like what is Carter and Sadie doing in the Sea of Chaos within the Duat, within the underworld? Yeah, awesome. So this takes place 6 months after we last left off within the Throne of Fire. So now we have a new deadline. We've had the spring equinox as the last deadline, and now we have the fall equinox as this new. Is it equinox? Is that the word? Or solstice? Summer solstice, winter solstice, fall equinox, spring equinox. Equinox. I was right. Okay. So we're now technically 9 months from when the first book started, when Julius Kane disappeared and Set was released and Julius became Osiris. That was 9 months prior to this book. So the Serpent Shadow, we're deadlining on the fall equinox. The kids are still running about Brooklyn House, trying to figure out their different house. This is the House of Life, still has magicians that are, anti-Kane for that matter. So the kids need to get the Book of Thoth, 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 or Thoth. I believe it's Thoth. And within the Book of Thoth, there's an execration spell, which is used to capture a shadow to, execrate it, to banish it, to get rid of it, right? And a shadow can be a physical manifestation of losing one's shadow, hence the Peter Pan story. But the Peter Pan story is actually derived from Egyptian mythology because of this lost shadow. The lost shadow story is in a lot of different mythologies, but we can trace it back to Egypt because it's one of the original civilizations. So there you go. Little history on that for you. So within capturing a shadow, you can execrate it, you can get rid of it, but you can also restore it. There's different ways to do these things. So the kids have to figure out how to capture Bess's, B-E-S, right? The dwarf god, his shadow, to reinstate him because he sacrificed his soul to get them more time, from Kobesh in the second book, the moon god. So they're using Bess's shadow as a example, as a test to see if the spell would actually work, and it does work. So how they know all of this is that they kind of convinced their dad, who's Osiris, the god of the dead, to let them take custody of Setni, who's a very maniacal, evil ghost magician, and he has evaded gods and goddesses and magicians and demons alike for centuries. But he's the only one who knows how to really find this Book of Thoth to, say this spell appropriately. While this is happening, Horus is still residing in Carter, Isis is still residing in Sadie, Anubis and Walt join forces together, and Ra joins forces with Zia. So you have all of the host and hostess going about with their god and godliest forms, respectively, while trying to figure out how to capture the Serpent Shadow in a little figure, to then use the spell accordingly to disperse him. So Apophis does escape. He, escapes the Sea of Chaos. He does swallow the sun, and the kids think that that's it, that's over, because he swallowed Ra. In this process, Ra is still refusing to become the new pharaoh that he has given Carter / Horus the crook and I forget the other thing. The two scepter things, the 2 items that the pharaoh holds like this on their chest. And Horus himself wants to be king. Carter doesn't want to be king. Ra doesn't want to be king. Zia has no idea what to do with Ra being inside of her, basically. They're trying to figure out how to work together. So as the story continues, it's still trying to find themselves. It's still trying to save the universe. So when they think the universe is over, it turns out the universe is not over. Because in the process of execrating Apophis with his shadow, with the serpent's shadow, they then basically banish all of the gods and goddesses back to the Duat, back to the underworld, because there is no more balance. So the Ma'at and Chaos have to be balanced. So if one is gone, then the other is gone. There's no balance until something happens along the way, and then things can unbalance themselves, or rebalance themselves, if you will. So Carter then accepts the fact that he's now in control of the Egypt Empire, that he himself is now the ruler of the world, in regards to the Egyptian mindset, in regards to the Egyptian house of life. Granted, their uncle Amos is still the chief lector, so he's in control of the first known, the house of life, but Carter is now the new pharaoh. And doing so, he gives a speech to all of his constituents, if you will, all of his Brooklyn Houser, magician kid friends, students, that they need to be prepared for whatever comes next. Setne is still on the loose. There are other gods, aside from the Egyptian gods, that might have stuff going on. There's magic happening on Long Island, that, they have to be aware of, obviously alluding to Camp Half-Blood, which is Greek magic, mythology, if you will. And so Horus then, in turn, is then giving the same exact speech in the underworld to all of the gods and goddesses who have been banished, basically, as Carter is giving the same speech in the, regular realm, if you will. So the Duat is the different realities of the different realms, and the Duat was going crazy when Apophis swallowed the sun and all of these different things, but now that it's back together, and now that everything is fine and okay, Sadie can figure out how the hell to date Walt/Anubis, because Isis is no longer with her, and Anubis is no longer banned from seeing Sadie in the mortal realm, because he did technically save Walt by fusing together with Walt, because Walt had that curse upon him and his family, through the Tutankhamun and Akhenaten line. I can't say the names properly, I do apologize. So this is a really awesome trilogy. It's an awesome collab book that we're going to read, called Demigods and Magicians. Like I said, we got Percy, we got Annabeth, we got Sadie, we got Carter doing some stuff. Because after Alexander the Great's empire fell, his general, Ptolemy, he was given Egypt, because Alex did have Egypt as part of his empire. Alexandria, Egypt was it's a big thing. It's still a big thing. So the Ptolemaic Empire is the mix of Greek and Egypt. And we actually go into that a lot within the Trials of Apollo books, that there are specific Greek-Egyptian gods that are created based off of old Greek gods or based off of old Egyptian gods, and they kind of just fuse things together. So it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat how when cultures meet, whether they want them to fuse together or not, things mesh and things become something different. So that's what's cool about different melting pots, is different cultures can mingle and come together as one. Does that make sense? It's not a matter of cultural appropriation. It's a matter of cultural mixing. Yeah. Mixing, melting pot, put everything in one pot. We're in one city, let's all work together. The joys of bigger cities, because larger cities all have people from different ethnicities, and they all realize we all bleed the same, and we all need the same type of healthcare and, shelter and stuff. So, let's all come together as one. Whereas places that don't have many mixes of nationalities or races are very one-minded, one-set-minded. It's unfortunate, it's how it is. But from what we've learned by reading all of the Rick Riordan books, by reading all the Rick Riordan Presents books, that's the purpose of all of this. Each culture has its own mythology. Each culture has its own story. And when you realize that a lot of the stories are all based on the same original stories, it all comes back to one. We are all one unit. We almost work together as one. It's pretty awesome. There's your physiology. Oh my God, I can't talk. Philosophy. There we go. Lesson for the day. The Serpent's Shadow by Rick Riordan. The Kane Chronicles of the Serpent's Shadow by Rick Riordan, the third and final book in the Kane Chronicles trilogy. On to Demigods and Magicians. Let's talk about that next. Mucho mahalo.